Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, Utopia to Utility, Re-examining Critical Urban Nodes. My name is Claire, and I am the Deputy Registrar at the OAA. We will begin today's webinar by acknowledging the land on which we are meeting and calling in from. For millennia, the place we call Ontario has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples and nations who have been stewards of the land and are deeply connected to its rich cultural and natural landscape. We would like to invite you in a moment of reflection to acknowledge our shared responsibility to address past and present injustices and provide space for Indigenous knowledge and worldviews to shape the architectural landscape of Turtle Island. So before we begin, I would like to just share some important information so that we can have an effective and professional webinar experience. Please know that the webinar is being recorded for quality and educational purposes. To maintain a stable internet connection, we have muted all of the participants' microphones and disabled your video feeds. We do highly encourage engagement through the Q&A window. So if you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you're able to submit questions at any point for our speaker. So please feel free anytime a question comes up to just put that question in the Q&A box. And there will be a designated period at the end of the presentation for those questions. I'll remind you again, but please do not hesitate. We love to hear your feedback. For those of you who are seeking your continuing education learning hours, do note that your attendance is crucial on this webinar. You will need to have a minimum of 80% attendance to be accredited those hours to your transcript. And we just ask you to wait a week or so for the uploading and recording of those hours. Finally, note that the presenter today does not provide any insurance, legal, or practice advice, and the OAA does not bear responsibility for any errors or omissions in the discussions during the webinar. For accessibility, we do provide automated closed captioning services available in multiple languages to accommodate the needs of our diverse audience. And now I am excited to introduce you to today's speaker. Please welcome Yew-Thong Leong.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning. I'm actually quite excited to be here today. I waited almost 7-8 years to kind of bring all of this out into the open. Just for context, the bulk of today's presentation came out of something that I've been teaching at the university, Toronto Metropolitan University, examining urbanism. I run an advanced architecture studio on architecture and urbanism. A lot of the research came out of things that we've done within the studio, my own research, of course, and then they're presented to the students. And today's version is actually a recap of a studio that was conducted. So a lot of the imagery that you see, products of my students, including a video. And specifically, 3 individuals need to be acknowledged: Thomas Ristov, Kurt Mui, Abhinawa Pradhan, who actually were quite instrumental in providing research assistantship in pulling all of this together. So I'm just going to jump into the content. Very quickly, the learning objectives are to re-examine this whole concept called critical urban nodes. Nothing new. Critical urban nodes are something that we've been studying. It has been given different names in the past. But in this particular session today, we're going to use one particular portion of Don Mills, specifically Don Mills in Eglinton, as a case study. It was actually used as a case study in the last session that I had, studio session that I had, and as a test case. And we've done other sites throughout the city just to prove that critical urban nodes are important, and they can be used in terms of moving forward into the future with some of the urban issues that we are experiencing in the city of Toronto, and actually globally as well too. One of them being housing. Earlier on, I was talking to someone that we have about 10,000 new Canadians arriving in the city of Toronto every year, and they have to be housed. And not every one of those new Canadians have the ability to live in some of the housing, the expensive housing that we have in the city. So the whole concept of affordable housing is even more dire. This is where it gets controversial. I like to challenge the current notions of zoning, land use, and development, and I'm going to suggest some rather controversial things. But having said that, they've been vetted with politicians, lawyers, planners, of course, architects, and other urbanists. And what I'm proposing may seem controversial, but they're not insurmountable, at least in my opinion. And along the way, we want to be providing, saving, and enhancing key community and urban infrastructure. We are very blessed to live in the city of Toronto, where there are a lot of urban infrastructure. Most of them are quite natural. So we want to be able to kind of preserve that. Unfortunately, historically, we've not been able to keep most of it. And I'm going to take you through a very short history of some of the things that we have not done well. And of course, addressing housing. And this particular site came out of a bit of a knee-jerk response to what had happened to the Ontario Science Centre. And part of that journey is to provide an alternative. And you see this alternative is quite viable. I've reached out to MPPs, but it's too controversial for them to participate. But I've spoken to councillors, I've spoken to MPs, and I've spoken to MPPs that are outside this region unofficially. And I think we have some traction in the approach that we took in this particular studio, but it's not centered around trying to save the Ontario Science Centre. This is not politicized. This is not weaponized. This is just simply to look at planning principles that we can use, perhaps not now, but in the future. So I spoke to this a moment ago, the Ontario Science Centre controversy. It kind of came a little bit out of that. But more importantly, it came out of me examining how we do town and country planning. In the old days, urban planning was known as town and country from the 40s to the 50s. And it's kind of quite telling with that name, town and country. There's a clear distinction between downtown and the suburbs. And then in the 60s and 70s, we pivoted to urban planning, where we make no distinguishing differences between suburbia and downtown. And if you're as old as I am, you would remember how the city was consolidated to become a mega city. So North York, Toronto, Scarborough, and all those places were simply consolidated into one mega city. And I knew the zoning examiner that was actually left in charge of trying to harmonize all of these zoning bylaws. And it was actually quite difficult. It took me a long, long time to do all of those things because that almost 100 years of legacy. I'll go through those things in a second. So this is not in support of, nor is it a criticism of the current situation of the Ontario Science Centre. I'm not interested in the politics behind all of those things. But I'm very interested in thinking outside the box. And you hear some of those quite controversial suggestions that I'll be making, and I'll be happy to address them if there's any pushbacks or support later on in the Q&A session. And my question is, can we re-examine town and country planning or urban planning, specifically from a social political dimension, as opposed to political? And the questions along the way is, what would politicians, residents, ratepayers, planners, lawyers, and architects have to say? I think all of this people do have to have a say in how we do things, grassroots level, community, bubbling up. And this is a bit of a segue into looking at critical urban nodes. Like I said, critical urban nodes is not new. It's a concept that's been bandied around many, many times. The question is, can we create an environment that can support critical urban nodes? Critical urban nodes, in my opinion, are very, very important in terms of the longevity, the sustainability of cities. So this is more than anything else a call to re-examine. And I would be more than happy to actually get some help from the audience or people that you think may be able to help with the conversation. I'm hoping to also relaunch this studio again this coming fall. And the more I dig into all of this, the less I begin to the more I begin to realize that I know less and less and less of something. So all this is done within a neutral, safe space in academia. So everything is permissible in my studio to examine things. And I like to call to re-examine things from a political point of view, for politicians to participate and contribute towards making practical land use governance and policy making. Allow ratepayers to express their fears. If you're like most Canadians, about 75, 80%, the house that we live in, the property that we own, is our pension plan. We have a very broken pension plan system in Canada. You cannot rely on your CPP alone to retire. You have to rely on your RESP. You have to rely on your government, sorry, your company pension plan. And even then, you're not going to have an amazing retirement. So we have to kind of look at the investments that we hold in real estate. Most of us do own a home as part of a pension plan. We need to educate lawyers and planners. Lawyers tend to be woods-centric and planners tend to be diagram-centric. And we have to educate this class of professionals to go beyond regulations and bylaws, go beyond the words, go beyond the diagrams. What can you and I do as architects? One of the first things we need to do is to be less heroic. I'm specifically referring to the concepts of planning advocated by people like Corbusier. So I coined this word Corbuversal as opposed to controversial. Be a little bit less dogmatic and embrace human-centric urban design and look at holism as an approach. So what went wrong? Second topic after the introduction. So very brief history. Not trying to present this as a history class. Looking at this particular site that we've been examining for about 12, 13 weeks, Don Mills and Eglinton. The original settlers used the Don River as primary transportation route and a source of food, and of course, water and material. The land, specifically the water wall, meaning the riverbank, is deeply connected to several indigenous groups. That's where they encamp, that's where they would live, that's where they would travel, sometimes along the riverbanks, and they fish, they live by that. So that was this quote-unquote city, except their settlements. And this part of the city used to be known as, and I'm going to butcher the name, Nechen Kwakakong, or once called Tonak, meaning backburned grounds. And where did that idea come from? Indigenous knowledge is a traditional way of using burns, as in setting things on fire, to control invasive species, promote native plant growth, and maintain the health of the land's unique ecosystem. So this is not being hostile to the land. This is actually part of rejuvenating the land as a way to honor and maintain the natural balance of the land. So I'm going to use that as a metaphor in a second. Then after that came colonial settlements. The Toronto Purchase to the British Crown, and then colonization period with the French and the British. And as more people come, there is a need for residential development, there's a need for infrastructure, there's a need for streets. No different than what we're experiencing right now. We no longer have the so-called French and British colonizers. We have new Canadians. So same challenges. Sadly, by the end of the First World War, 90% of the initial landscape was destroyed, partly through this kind of settlements. The river just became the means of providing sustenance and raw material, lumber mills, and hence the wood don mills, and domestic animals being raised. So the characteristic, like I said earlier on, the initial landscape has been changed significantly. And we are doing that right now. I'm not passing judgment on whether this is good or bad. I'm just relaying history, the way it had been occurring. And the growth of cities is not something that we can push back on. It's just the nature of community, humanity. But we can do certain things. One of them is land is a form of commodity, and look at it more as a utility in perhaps. So in this particular case, we were trying to kind of control the use of that commodity through the use of zoning. And I'm going to actually flash another point of view later on very shortly. And of course, what happens was with any development, we have accumulation of waste and pollution. Water becomes undrinkable. And we're trying to reverse all of those things. Deforestation, we're trying to reverse all of those things. I'm actually seeing, I'm a bit of a fisherman. I'm seeing actually salmon, not that I want to eat any salmon off, any fishes off the Don River, but I'm seeing fishes actually spawning, which is a good sign. So the question then is, can we actually backburn some of the things that we made, some of the invasive practices that we have made, some of the legacy systems that we put into place that are actually horrible when it comes to trying to build in this city? Again, I'm not complaining. I'm just simply saying here some pain points that we have experienced as architects, as planners. Some of them don't even make any sense. So here are some of those things in the suburbs, and I'm now talking about going beyond the downtown core, and every city would have its own suburban characteristics. Suburbia, the suburbs have very inexpensive large parcels of land because at one point they used to be either unclaimed land, crown land, or just simply agricultural land. So very, very large parcel. When you buy something at a cheaper price, you tend to buy, quote unquote, in bulk. And then you build one small little building on a big piece of land, low density, and you have what I call voluntary setbacks. You do not build on the edge, you put in the middle because it's this figure in the ground, kind of very Corbusian utopian way of designing architecture, this grand vista looking into your piece of land. And site planning begin to lack purpose and lack utility, just simply landscape. We also have legacy zoning from the past. If you are ever involved in development work, you would come across pieces of zoning bylaw that absolutely make no sense, and you have to go through all kinds of appeal, even order to OLT to get them repealed. So they're just remnants. They're just basically things that are just floating out there. Right? And sometimes past zoning practices lacks continuity. So a good example would be the mega city that I talked about earlier on, as we were trying to pull all the 5 boroughs together. There are some zoning practices that make no sense because it's just unique to perhaps East York, and the rest of the boroughs have nothing to do with that. Sometimes it could be the characteristic of the geography that you're working within, but nevertheless, there is a lack of continuity, and we are still suffering from the legacy of the consolidated city of Toronto. We are still coming across bits and pieces of zoning bylaws that absolutely make no sense, and planners scratch their head, lawyers scratch their head, and it's like, okay, what do we do? Well, nothing we can do. You have to get it repealed, all the way to OLT, perhaps even. So here is an image of this corner that I talked about, and it's a GIF, and you see despite the development, we are still looking at large parcels of land. Um, um, some of them have been nicely converted to housing, but some of them right at the intersection are just big pieces of land, especially the one on the western side where the science center is, big, huge parking lot. Is there a need, and I'm not trying to be controversial, to tear down the science center to build housing? Our contention is no. And we will show you some of the solutions that we've came up with, again, based on using critical urban nodes. Here is a zoning analysis, and some of the legacy zoning absolutely make no sense. It cuts across Don Mills and it cuts across Eglinton because they were, like I said a moment ago, legacies. And nothing has been done to kind of clean it up, and it's just left in the books. So those are some of the things that we examine. And the good thing about clean slate, which is what we try to do in our studio, is clean slate, as in, let's just look at this. And these are the parcels of lands that I'm talking about, large suburban parcels. There is an attempt on the eastern side, south of Eglinton, to actually turn them into housing. Quite successful, in my opinion. But the rest of the parcels is this kind of idyllic landscape, very Corbusian, very utopian. You see some of these curvatures, very reminiscent of 1950s pre-modern architecture. And 2025, we still have that. So our challenge is to come back and say, let's have a look at this, ignore all those boundaries, look at them as interstitial spaces and what can be done. And that's what we did. So, and here's a contrast to downtown. Okay. Zoning downtown tend to be coming out of utility. So they build the buildings and they're limited only by technology and your neighbors to a certain point, and then the zoning kind of get layered on top of that. As opposed to suburbia, you lay out the parcel of land and then you tell them what you can build on top of it. So bottom up, top down. That's the comparison that I want to give. Francesco Procacci, this is actually what prompted a lot of the discussion. Asked that question: is this the end of zoning? Spaces are blurring, functions are merging, and this is very, very true. Dr. Francesco Procacci is an urbanist based out of Italy, a scholar, and he asked that question. And there are 4 points that he brought forward. Home is no longer just home, a place for work, for care. So if you're ethnic like I am, multi-generational homes are very, very common. We see that a lot in Brampton, and Brampton is actually struggling. Brampton is actually struggling with all these legacies that we've left behind. And they're trying to kind of deal with this from all points of view, secondary plans, official plans. They're just bumping into things that doesn't make any sense for the demographic that they have. It's also a place for learning. We learned that, pardon the pun, we learned that from COVID. People were spent 4 years at home to attend university, a form of entertainment. Cinemas are closing down. We're watching more and more, consuming more and more through our laptops. And one room can actually have many lives. And this illustration, this came from Francesco. The street is a plaza. I have done a lot of work in China, and typically they do not have urban open spaces. They actually use the street as a form of urban open spaces. And if you are a kid growing up in Canada, you play street hockey on a quiet street, and you just run down the street up and down, and there's a car, you yell car, and if it moves out of the way, you pull the nets out of the way, and then you resume. So streets, sidewalks are actually truly shared spaces designed for sitting, for playing, for eating, for meeting. And if you go to Europe, you know what I'm talking about. Can we do more of that? This is again Francesco talking from school to stage. Type of use. Schools are closed in the evening. Can they be used for cultural events? Can hospitals not have cafes and training centers? Public buildings are no longer monofunctional. And that's how we create more density. So he's basically challenging us to kind of look at legacy zoning, single use, and look at time sharing, look at shifting of events and stuff like that. I attend a church that in the evening, the community hall is a martial arts dojo. We let community who come in and use that. We have language classes. We have all kinds of stuff, and babysitting is one of the things that we also allow in the school, kind of like a daycare, not a licensed daycare, but like a bit of a drop-in. So we have to have more of those kind of things, and what we are doing is likely quite illegal, but nevertheless, it serves a community purpose. Airport is the new downtown. A good one is Changi Airport in Singapore. People go to that airport to shop. It's a shopping mall. Same thing in Hong Kong. So they're becoming urban districts in their own rights. Some people, a lot of airports have hotels right now, and they're also business centers. I fly a lot at one point. Sometimes when I'm in transit to a city, I don't go to the downtown core. I just stay within the hotel, and there are business centers within the hotel. Airport food is actually getting a little bit better. We have Wolfgang Park in Toronto. I mean, it can be quite controversial whether his food is good or not, but better than some anonymous food court type food. Union Station is another good example in Toronto. If you've ever been down into the basement of Union Station, wonderful, wonderful food hall out there. So should we abandon zoning altogether? He's saying, no, we have to rethink it. I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to skip through right that. Basically, he's saying some pieces don't fit. That's why we still need planning, and we have to re-examine it, in other words. So what needs to be done? I'm just looking at my time, and I'm doing okay. Can we backburn? My answer is yes, metaphorically speaking. Start with zoning. Zoning, in my opinion, has been a utopian tool without a whole amount of consideration for utility. So suburban zoning is a good example. Parcel of land used to be a big farm, used to be a single owner. Let's parcel it like that, and hopefully decades later we can rezone it. But decades later, when you try to rezone it, politicians don't like that. Ratepayers, residents do not like that. Landowners do not like that. So there's this pushback. So that's what I mean by the lack of utility. And there's a need to increase granularity of suburbs. Suburbs tend to be too single-dimensional. Cars, parking lot, buildings. Can we do a lot more? Can we time shift? Can we have mixed use? Can we slow things down? Can we have more urban streets that are also plazas? That's what I mean by granularity. Currently, zoning doesn't allow those kind of things. Can we do a little bit more? Land use reform is needed. So we have to create density and create use, not just value. And here's where it gets really, really controversial. Allow more easements, as in you have a parcel of land, there's another parcel of land next to you, you create an easement on your site, and your neighbor create an easement, you consolidate easement, and then the interstitial place between your two parcels of land, the so-called voluntary setbacks, can we put use into that consolidation? And talking to municipal lawyers and talking to some politicians, they say yes. Same thing can be used with severance, where you have a large parcel of land, you sever it, and you can also conjoin them. Can we have right-of-ways on private lands? Sometimes a piece of land is landlocked. Can we create right-of-ways? The answer is also yes. Can you assign a portion of your land, that right to it, for another use? The answer is yes. The reality is you can, because it's just a piece of land. It's open, is a clean canvas. The problem is the zoning, the legacy zoning that we have is restricting you from doing those kind of things. So we have to kind of think outside the box. And if you want to create more density, this is the only way to do it. If you want to create more housing, this is the only way to do it. Now, can we do this tomorrow? Likely not. Can we do this next year? Likely not. Next decade? Likely not. But we have to start thinking about it right now. And they should all be driven by facts. Building code and planning bylaws should be a little bit more integrated. In many cities, they are integrated, and they are also integrated from the point of view of health and fire safety. And they are not just simply irrational setbacks. And how many have worked on a project where you have this setback and it just make no sense? They want the 6-meter setback, and you go back and you look, and it's legacy zoning bylaws, and now you have a perfectly useful parcel of land that cannot be done. So can we not create an easement? Can we not sever them? Can we not have private, can we not have right of ways? So those irrational setbacks have to be addressed. Relaxing restriction. I have a lot of issues with how ratepayers, politicians, councillors, planners look at a shadow cast by a building as though it's a plague. Oh, we cannot have that. Everything's going to be cast in the dark and you're going to get infestation, blah, 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 blah. It just makes no sense. We are all right now in a room that is in shadow. Think about that for a moment. I'm in a room that is in shadow. So fear of heights. There's this thing about height that we have. Parking your cars are not urban enemies. There's a need for parking. There's a need for cars. I believe in mixed use. And I also believe in the next line, smart density, specifically time shifting, time of use. And mixed use allows you to actually create buffers between time of use. So the idea of a podium and putting an office floor as an interstitial space, and then apartments on top of it is one of the good ways of doing things. And that's done quite a lot in American cities, and done quite a lot as well as in European cities, but not a lot in Canada. We have to kind of think about this kind of smart density. And it kind of makes sense. When you're not in the office, very quiet, and that acts as a buffer between the podium floor, which is commercial, and the upper floor, which is housing. Think about that for a second. You don't have to think about this vertically. You can also think about this horizontally as well too. So we say start with zoning, and then with programming. Utility, mixed use is very, very important. And with mixed use, we can actually mix housing into everything else. And we keep talking about this 15-minute city. And then when it comes to somebody putting housing, we oppose it. Too dense, too noisy, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't make any sense. And mixing housing into commercial, into institutional is the formula, is the solution behind a 15-minute city. Of course, public transit and infrastructure, you don't touch that. That is not something to be challenged. We have to have enough of it. And Don Mills in Eglinton is actually a good example where the introduction of public transit allow a lot of things to happen. If you travel along Eglinton, and I live very close to Eglinton, you see a lot of redevelopment occurring because public transit has allowed that. Is a bit of a catalyst. We talk a lot about walkability, and I just talked about it a moment ago, the idea of 15-minute city. Let's not forget about cars. And I said, I'm not against cars. Cars are actually quite important. Cars are needed sometimes for destination. And the Ontario Science Center is a very good example why you need to have a car. It's the only science center that we have other than up in Sudbury in Ontario. So if you're living up in, let's just say, Utopia, you're not going to take public transit to come all the way across. So you need to have a car to get there, or Uber or something equivalent to that, because it's a destination. And when you have destination as part of your urban mix, you get more vitality. So I am posing the concept of a 15-mile city, as in you should be able to drive 15 minutes anywhere in the city. Um, uh, but it's a metaphor. The reality is 15 minutes is about 25 kilometers, and in the city of Toronto is a 30 to 45-minute drive. So again, 15-minute city is a metaphor, as is a 15-minute city is also a metaphor. But my point is that you need to allow for cars, meaning parking. That if you have a family out in Etobicoke coming to the city of Brampton, you're going to pack 4 or 5 people into the car. You're not going to take public transit. And then when you actually land in this particular place, you have a very revitalized community. So right now, Ontario Science Center, yes, very controversial, they're tearing down. I live very close to it. I ride my bike behind it all the time. It is very, very quiet. People don't actually visit the Science Center because it's a place that's very, very hard to get to. Certainly, we need to create and leverage blue-green meaning water and parks. If you go to Europe, we see a lot of fountains, we see a lot of water pads, we see a lot of those kind of things. We don't do enough of that. Water is an element that resonate with us. And we do very well in Toronto pocket parks, but we don't do fountains and stuff like that because they're hard to maintain. And the concept of hard to maintain should be challenged. So we want to grow zoning out of use, out of programming, out of utility. So start with zoning and then program. So I'm now going to take you into this Don Mills and Eglinton case study site. This is what it looks like currently. You see this little parcel of land on the right-hand side that has been converted into housing, quite successful. And then those are quite modern. Those were maybe the last 20, 30 years. And then we have all this legacy Corbusian style housing figure in the ground, kind of a idyllic landscape, except they're not as idyllic because when you put those parcels next to each other, they become dense and they become quite irrational. So you get these little parcels of land that has really not much utility to it. It's very utopian in character. And then on the western side, you have, I say you have a huge parking lot and then a science center behind it. And a moment ago, I questioned whether you should be tearing down the science center when you have all this parking in front of it that could be used for housing. Again, like I said, I'm not gonna get into the political aspect of all of this, but here's something: a figure ground study, lots of open land. The density is not exactly there. If you remember the contrast that I showed earlier on between this part of the city and downtown core, we can certainly pack a little bit more. And the impetus for studying this came out of the Ontario line and the Eglinton line, the two lines at intersection. So what can we do? This is what we can do. We can have housing, definitely. And there's a hydro corridor south of us. So that could be used for agricultural purposes, urban agriculture specifically, and we can have light industry right next to it. And I'll talk about some of those later on. And community uses. When you come to the science center, if you live around here, you need some kind of a commercial entertainment type of facilities. And in this particular study, we've included community centers, libraries, community theaters as all part of this. So I'm going to actually show you what my students have done. And it's not just simply a wish list. This is actually very, very carefully studied. And I'll show you some of the statistics that we've been through, the demographics that we studied. You can actually see along Don Mills a pedestrian mall. So instead of just putting a tower on a podium, we put it right next to a mall. And then underneath the Ontario line, we actually put commercial as well too. So the idea is to encourage people to walk. And then we put a very controversial parking lot right underneath the buildings. It's a destination. So you park underneath and you spend the day down there, and you may even spend the evening down there because there are also community theaters and restaurants and stuff like that. So I cannot get too granular in this particular presentation, but we've done a very massive master plan showing all the users. We track all the numbers. We think this is a viable, quote unquote, 15-minute city all to its own, a neighborhood, critical urban node. And that's the whole point behind all of this. So those are the parcels of land that we want to build on. And surprisingly, they work quite well with the existing parcels that are right there right now. So not too controversial when you start thinking about it, just the density and some of the setbacks. Not that bad. And that's only permissible if you can actually get the zoning, the setbacks, the severance, and the consolidation going. So, for example, this piece of land where the Ontario Science Center is, we want to kind of turn them into residential, and that takes a lot of legal wrangling. But if the zoning bylaws are a little bit more permissive, then they're all possible. And do you want it to be possible? The answer is yes, to get all of this, the 15-minute walkable city. Here's a video that I want to show you and what can be possible based on what we just saw early on. There's no music, but I'll talk on top of it. So Ontario Line, Eglinton Crosstown, couple of stations close by. So transit stops basically. On the eastern side, lots of residential. Can it have more housing? The answer is yes. Should they be more purposeful? The answer is yes. Low-income housing is one of those. Ethnic responsive housing is another one. When I say ethnic responsive, I mean intergenerational homes. As you can tell, the ground plane is given back to the city. The podium is a combination of commercial office, so you work close to where you live, and then the tower is above that. And if you examine this very, very carefully and put on an objective lens, this is not much more different than the downtown core of a city. Some of the things that we see over here are very reminiscent of what happens downtown. And in this particular case, we get a benefit of the ravine. Connection to the subway is another characteristic. And there's a video of the ravine coming up. So behind the science center at the edge of the ravine, it can actually be utilized, connecting buildings with podium, sky bridges, back down to the subway line, internal corridors. This is a typo. It should say 15-minute city, not 5-minute. Podium, and then the commercial use, and then potentially a mid-rise or a high-rise. Build tos dedicate the ground plane back to the street, have publicly accessible community use. So this is a library. This is right next to the science center. On the right-hand side of the podium is actually a pedestrian mall, and the pedestrian mall leads into a plaza in front of the science center and food halls. So this is a destination, and like I said early on, below this building is a parking garage. You drive there, you arrive there, you do the science center, you do the food mall, you walk along the pedestrian mall. You can stay the whole day. In the evening, you can go to the community theater. So this is a destination, no different than what we have downtown. Critical urban nodes create multiple downtowns across the city. So you don't have to always come downtown. You can go to different critical urban nodes to partake in community life. The beauty of this particular site is the ravine system that is close by. So if you want to be quite urban, you can stop at this edge. If you don't, if you want to be even more natural, you can actually go down the ravine system. So that's the video. It gives you a glimpse of what may be possible. So how do we do this? We can leverage some existing tools. We can move forward. Secondary plans. Do not be too apologetic to the official plan that governs it. Think outside the box. What do I mean by that? Do more. Don't look at an official plan as this parcel of land, but to think about them as contiguous neighborhoods. In other words, we need to do much, much more secondary plan, and we have to stitch them together so that we get that contiguous use of urban spaces. Make sure that it's urban design driven, walkability, public transit, allow for cars. I'm not against cars. I'm not frightful of cars. Land reappropriation. We can appropriate land from landowners. Controversial, yes, I know. Politicians do not like it. I know, I'm aware of that. But sometimes it has to be done. Use severance of land as another tool. And then have the ability to consolidate the severed land or consolidate easements. I talked about that a moment ago. How do we achieve all of those things? We have to have a new class of land use professionals, lawyers that are highly specialized in land development. Bring in land economists and evaluators. That way, the fear that we have of losing value in our land when we trade it for use and community purposes. If I'm sitting on a piece of land and I'm afraid of it being appropriated because I'm not getting what I think the land is worth, this is where land economists and the evaluator can come along and actually attend to that. Urbanists. We do not have a class of professionals called urbanists. We either have planners or architects, and sometimes we have urban designers. Could they be urban designers? Could there be a new class of land use professionals? What about landscape architects? The landscape architects, we look at them as shrubbing remnants of land. That's really, really wrong. They're trained for high landscape, for site programming, and a lot of those kind of things. Can we not harness their expertise? Urban geographers, they have the numbers, they have the demographics, they use facts. Can we not, they look at social political dimensions of land use. So this is this pushback that I'm trying to create in lieu of this top-down zoning. Let's do bottom-up. We have this new class of examiners, professionals to help us. Mindful of time. So this is a call to re-examine. And I've been able to do this for the last 6-7 years in a safe space called a classroom. Should we have politicians to come in and inform us, to participate, to contribute towards practical land use governance and policy making? And you'd be pretty amazed some of the ideas that some politicians have, but sometimes they feel handcuffed because of their colleagues, because of the way things are done. But you put them in a neutral, safe space, they open up quite significantly. Ratepayers, residents, what's the biggest fear? They fear NIMBYism is a fear of losing the value that is inherent in their real estate. Like I said, that fear come out of the broken pension system that we have. We do not want to lose value because that's our retirement. So we have to address those kind of things. And like I said a moment ago, when we have a new class of land use professionals, land economists and evaluators, we are locking in a safety mechanism to address that fear. Educate lawyers and planners to think more like city planners. Go beyond words, go beyond diagrams, be human-centric. Can architects contribute? The answer is yes, absolutely. But we have to be a little bit more, a little bit less heroic, a little bit less dogmatic, embrace human-centric urban design, and even take a very holistic approach to looking at things. So trying to conclude right now, critical urban nodes. So this is actually a summary of what came out of the studio. This is not actually generated by me. This is actually generated by my students, and this is what they came up with. And you would argue that, oh, they're just students. There is really no experience. There's no knowledge behind it. And I would beg to differ. And I'll come back and explain that in a second. So after having gone through 15 weeks, 12 to 13 weeks of looking at this, here are some of the conclusions. And of course, they have the legacy of they have the benefit of a legacy of 6-7 years of that studio, the accumulated knowledge that came out of that. And of course, some of my own research, which I'll present at the end of this slides over here. People, place, and planet should be diverse, inclusive, and sustainable. Human-centric design, we talk about that. Scale urban density, we have to have a granularity in the way we do things. So in this study that we did, we have townhouses, we have the missing mid-rises, we have point towers, and mixed use. We have different types of housing types, from low-income housing to expensive units. Integrated public realm, with the whole idea of the ground plane, giving everything on the podium floor back down to the city for public access, libraries, retail space, commercial space. We even have agricultural greenhouses because of the hydro land next to us. And then food processing, where you package the greens, we package the beans, all very local, and they get sold locally. And of course, resilience, and certainly engage the community. So the studio aims to do that. We try to bring in politicians, lawyers, planners, architects, residents for engagement. So that is what the student gave back at the end of almost every session. This all came back, and those are the principles where they used to design that particular segment of the city that's assigned to them. In this particular case, it's Don Mills and Eglinton. But those principles are actually consistent with sound practices. Okay, and this is a set of principles that I had presented previously, I believe at last year's OAA presentation. And this all came out of research. This came out of other people's thinking and consolidated. And the thinking behind, and I used the word healthy city because that's been a line of inquiry that I've been conducting previous to this. And I presented this back to the students as the introduction of the class. They listened to it, and they're asked to examine the challenge. And so these are the set of principles: active transportation, access to green space, healthy food access, walkability, community design, access to healthcare, very, very important. And of course, environmental sustainability. So that's the top-down approach. So those are the principles, and we have a top-down approach in the city of Toronto, where we have zoning, land use planning, then we have environmental regulation. This is basically how we write our zoning bylaws and regulations. We have, to a certain degree, health policies, not as much perhaps in comparison to other cities. Access to daycare through the use of zoning, infrastructure investment. Cities do invest in that. Public safety. And then I look at all of this thing and say, okay, this is all good, but the top-down approach is actually legacies. Sometimes they are more like a reaction to things. Can we maybe look at this from a grassroots level, bottom-up approach? And this was again presented last year at one of the conferences. And HC stands for Healthy Cities, BOK stands for Body of Knowledge, and I created out of a whole bunch of research 6 key principles. And some of those are beginning to sound a little bit like a repeat. Good city planning needs active transportation, you need green spaces. And the answer is very, very simple. That's the truth. So these are the 6 sets of principles that we have to think about. And funny enough, they line up with the conclusions that the students came up with of critical urban nodes. So everything is very consistent. I'm just going to jump into Healthy City Body of Knowledge, book BOK Body of Knowledge 1, active transportation. What do I mean by active transportation? Transportation mix. We cannot just simply have walkable cities. We have to allow for other form of transportation. Yeah, e-bike scooters is a thing. Cargo bikes, I'm seeing more and more of that, not just in Amsterdam, not just in Copenhagen. Motorcycle taxis. In Asia, you see tons and tons of those kind of things. The missing middle in transportation is something called jeepneys or mini buses. We have big, long buses. What about the little ones that don't have a fixed route? They're allowed to deviate. So it's kind of like a bit of an Uber. Regional trains, we don't have enough of it. Go trains, in fact, is quite controversial what's happening right now with the Go train system. So active transportation, if you implement it, and there's a study done for London and for Delhi, if you actually actively combine that into your city planning, and you have low emission motor vehicles, meaning electric cars, bicycles, stuff like that. There's a concept called DALI, which is the equivalent of 1 year's worth of full health. So this year I had about 10 days of sickness, plus or minus. I would like to have it to 365. If you can reduce the use of cars, and again, I'm not against cars, and have a lot more active transportation, London would have a reduction of 7,439 year of full health reduced. Delhi would have 12,999, 13,000. And this came out of James Woodcock's study. Community engagement, very important. The World Health Organization basically argues that if you have public participation is tied into healthy cities. Green spaces, creating public spaces, sidewalks. I talked about the walkable streets, parquets. One thing that I didn't put in here is water elements. There's a correlationship that this is done by Dr. Neuenhausen, that green spaces reduces premature mortality. This is not speculative. This is actually a study done, a systemic study done by scholars, by doctors, by public health professionals. And the conclusion is there's an inverse association between surrounding greenness and all-cause mortality. So the idea of blue and green is very, very critical. Access to healthy food, farmers market, community garden, food rescues, ethnic foods. Ethnic foods tend to be less produced in a factory. They tend to be more "quote unquote" homemade, cooperative, special interest groups. And the issue that we have is this thing called cold chain compliant, meaning processed food. The distribution channel with a lot of the food that we have is to safeguard the food itself and not necessarily always for health and nutrients. And when you create zones that allow urban agriculture, we cut short a little bit of that cold chain compliant processed food distribution channel. And this is written by Nevin Cohen in a book called Roles of Cities in Creating Healthful Food Systems. He's basically a food security expert. Social connections. I talked about time shift. I talk about uses of spaces when they're closed or when they're no longer being used. So shopping malls can be opened up. Schools and universities can be opened up. Sidewalks and streets can be urban open spaces. I talk about music and shows, pop-ups, put a little piano. You've seen this before in a public square, and you get 5-10 minutes of healthy entertainment and social connections. And it could be a local musician. It could be just a guy who just knows how to play the piano. He goes on it for 5 minutes, and you create a social connection, a sense of belonging. Very, very important. More socially connected people live longer. Again, not my speculation. These are all done by people that are extremely scholastic in their approach, and I've listed quite a few sources over here. Last but not least, affordable housing. We have to think about housing. We cannot not think about housing. Lauren Taylor argued that housing has a relationship to health. Housing stability, quality, safety, affordability all affects health outcomes, as do physical and social characteristics of neighborhoods. So not just housing alone, but a whole bunch of other things. Concluding, so this is my big thing. This is what I do, architecture, urbanism, and living. Architecture and urbanism are basically the human-made built physical environment that contain us. Not good enough to just look at them, look at the buildings, look at the street, but we have to think about the function that we put within them, the humans, the content. So living is about the human activities of people living, working, learning, and playing in those containers that I just talked about. So architecture and urbanism can have a profound effect. This is like preaching to the choir on living and how we can mediate and remediate how we live and how we design the built environment. Because they create desirable, healthy outcomes for us. Thank you. I pack a lot of things into this. Some of them are quite controversial. Zoning being one, we have to really remap the way we look at things. And this came out of the work of, except for the last set of slides, most of this came out of the work of my students. Amazing team, and every year I have an amazing team. I'm looking forward to the next team that are coming up. If you want to get hold of me, I'm at the university. I have a private practice called SSG Architecture, and I'm also on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to talk to anyone who wishes to talk to me and also wish to participate. In fact, previous to this series of studios, I had another set of studios where I actually brought professionals in, and I actually pair up a professional with a student. Previously, I brought in academics, but maybe this coming semester, I would like to bring in lawyers, politicians, people that can afford to spend some time and work with the students. And that contribution gets embedded in the students' work, and the students' work get documented, and it become part of a set of principles that we can continue to refine. And hopefully it can be part of a movement where we actually push back on some of the zoning practices that we've been using, and hopefully launch into a new way of doing things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was such an interesting presentation. I know there are a lot of questions probably people are having. I have one question here I'm going to read, but I just wanted to remind everybody on today's webinar that Q&A box is where you'll go to enter your question for Yew-Thong. I see someone with their hand up, but we just don't have that ability to disable video or audio feeds. So please write your question. So I'm going to ask the first question by Alan. Very interesting proposal. How do you incorporate quote unquote time in the process of these large scale quote unquote one-shot type of mixed infrastructures? Can these projects be less related to a large influx of money so that the city you are aiming at be as multi-layered as the model of urban living you are referring to? Can mixity be achieved in time rather than large multi-use and complex buildings, and more like a kind of more tactic approach? This to give answers to cities that have less pressure than Toronto, for example, to still work in the same perspective you're proposing. Montreal is a good example for this problem, problematic or problem maybe. where the economic power is just not as strong as Toronto and makes the scale of projects very difficult, therefore questionable.
Thank you, Elaine. That's a very good question. Clearly, we don't have multi-billions of dollars to throw into a project and make it happen overnight. In this particular case, even before that, of investing tons and tons of money into this, there's also this controversy that I've created of basically throw out the zoning bylaws and actually just start from first principles, basically bottom up. So the idea behind all this, like all large development, is to create a master plan, if you wish, a secondary plan. Reparcel the pieces of land, look at all the setbacks, try to bring not just land value creation, but utility and use into that, lock them in. And then slowly over time, we can develop them. Is this going to happen overnight? The answer is no. Just the zoning alone is going to take you some time. And then the actual investment and the build itself is going to take a lot of time. But we have to start now, because if we don't, then we push this legacy of the 100 years into the next 100 years. So now it's time to start. Would this likely happen in my lifetime if everybody agreed to what I'm saying? The answer is no. You just have to start somewhere. And then when people see that vision, that so-called influx of money, and money is important, money is not a dirty word, it may generate some traction, and then people will begin to invest in it. I understand this. I have a degree in economics prior to finishing my architecture degree. There's a lot of money locked into a system. They're always looking for place to be utilized. And I do not mean this in a very hungry capitalist point of view. They're punching money. There are government money. There are nonprofit money that would have to be put to good use. So we do not always have to rely on a so-called rich developer to come along. We can have so-called public or semi-public money to be invested. So a pension plan, and a lot of the condos that we see today are actually built using those kind of money. A lot of developers actually have gone in that direction. But you have to have that master plan, and one that makes sense, that is in place. The politicians are assured. Mostly the residents around you are assured. Investors will come along and say, okay, this is a safe investment. We have a safe space. And people will begin to invest. And when you have that investment, then the traction will occur. One good example is Shops of Don Mills. I worked on that project actually many, many decades ago. And it's master plan, and slowly they are building it out, and they're almost done after 15 years. And that's a much nicer place than what it used to be. I remember it being a plaza. And I have a grandson, and I take him to the little choo-choo train park around there.
Yeah, it's a lovely, the office of the OAA is very close to that project. And it's true. That ability to walk around and to sit outside and to move is very, very appealing. That's kind of like when you build it, they will come sort of mentality, like you have to show people.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Cadillac Fairview had that vision when they put that together. So and that is a mini-sized version of what we are hoping to do. And here's the good thing. The city is big enough to actually have a lot of this kind of critical urban nodes. And I would like to say that Soptodomio is somewhat of a miniaturized version of a critical urban node. It's somewhat self-containing.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a big parking garage. It's a destination. People go there.
Yeah.
You know, people that live in Utopia that wants to drive all the way out there, and they get to enjoy a little bit of that. And I certainly want people to enjoy the science center.
Yeah. Okay, we have one other question from John. All your proposals are the scale that can be constructed by major construction companies. How will smaller companies be accommodated?
Hi, John. If you look at those big parcels of land that I talked about, some of them are severed. I also talk about consolidating severances. So you would have basically two condo developers, and they would sever part of the setback to create an intermediate parcel of land. That's a smaller piece of land. And I believe smaller developers can participate in that. There's also the whole concept of cooperative. There's a mall in Toronto called Pacific Mall. If you're Asian, you know what I'm talking about. That is a cooperative. It's a condo.
I think he has one clarifying question. He does a variety. Can new development be freehold instead of condominium? Sounds like maybe a legal question too.
Yeah, that's more of a legal question.
Yeah, we can answer those
Yeah,
specific.
I don't have a right answer right away for that.
Yeah. That's a lawyer question.
Yeah, but again, I'm proposing some super controversial and forget about the zoning, right?
Mhm.
Just do what makes sense. And I think a good lawyer always say, do what makes sense, and I'll wrap the law around you.
Mhm. Okay.
So I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, it's like scale is the issue,
Yeah.
not, yeah, okay. Yeah, good point. I know Ashley, I think we're waiting for other questions, so please in the meantime, but I think Ashley had one specific question to ask as well.
Yes. Hi. So for Yew-Thong, thank you again for your presentation. You obviously talked a lot about Don Mills and zoning in Don Mills. But outside of that, what are your thoughts on other areas of Toronto? Toronto's can be pretty big. What are your thoughts on what's happening outside of Don Mills and what zoning is like in other parts of the GTA?
So we look at Don Mills as a case study. We also identify about 12 other places around the city that is just ripe for that. Rexdale is one. Scarborough, in fact, one is actually happening right now further east, Eglinton and Victoria Park. That's right for that. And we can keep going. And the whole idea is to create this critical urban nodes. And really, if you just kind of strip all the hype around the word critical urban nodes, we're talking about neighborhoods. That's what this is about. And we're creating all these little neighborhoods and we're linking them together. They're not parcels of land, but they're contiguous use from neighborhood to neighborhood to neighborhood to neighborhood. Toronto used to be known as a city of neighborhood. And that is mostly in a downtown core. The question is, can we replicate this outside of as you suggested, outside of the downtown core into the rest of the GTA? The answer is yes. Immediately north of us is actually this interstitial nowhere land before you hit the shops of Don Mills. IBM used to, Brinkman Hammond, IBM, color dealerships are all around there. And that can be studied. In fact, we are looking to actually study more of that in the next semester. And the idea is to link all these neighborhoods to be contiguous rather than parcels of land. So not this semester, but last semester we did Eglinton and Laird. So we keep on building this little contiguous neighborhoods. And one of these days we're going to look at all of this and kind of stitch them all together. And in the meantime, I think Alain asked a question, element of time. Maybe I'm just planning the whole of GTA for us over the last 6-7 years, and maybe the next decade. Maybe, I don't know.
But I think that's what's so great about Toronto too, is the neighborhoods and that ability to walk through
Yes.
neighborhood to neighborhood. And you're
Yeah.
right, there are those gaps in terms of like it's not very hospitable for pedestrians or
Yeah.
cyclists.
Well, downtown you have that. And the
Yeah,
question is, can we extend that into the suburbs? Stop looking at the suburbs as suburbs. Start looking at them as neighborhoods.
yeah, exactly. One of the things I love about I'm lucky to live in the center, and all the parks now have these table tennis or ping
Yes.
pong.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you were talking about the community and bringing people together, just those simple things, and you see people young, old, all ages, and it is a point of connection where you can get to know your neighbors, and build that sense of community. So I love whoever thought of that is, I think, a genius. But yeah, wanting
We
to.
live in an amazing city. There's just so much potential. Of course, housing is a huge issue, but we have to once we begin to address those things and we put housing in mixed use and we create those 15-minute walkable cities, then we have the critical urban nodes and we start connecting them. And
That is, actually, that was another thought when you said the 15-minute city, because the joke now is Toronto is an hour from Toronto.
yes,
So yeah, I think that's a real struggle that, you know, we're just to get from the east end to the west end or any north to south, it does really diminish the
Yep.
employment of the city when you feel like you don't know, is it going to be a 20-minute car ride or am I going to
Yep.
stuck on an on-ramp for 45
Yeah. I want to be fair to my city. I want to be patient. Rome wasn't built in a day. So I live right next to, I actually live at Eglinton Lair. I've been waiting for the Eglinton Crosstown forever.
Mm.
I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
I ride my bike in the summer, so I bypass all the traffic, but when I have to drive, not fun. Like you said, Toronto is an hour away from Toronto, but they promised that the line will be operating, and I'm just
Yeah.
waiting to be chauffeured downtown. I'm
Yeah.
looking at
I
those
think
street cars.
we have our popcorn, we're all waiting for
Yes,
that.
I've been dying to get into one of those streetcars.
I
They
know,
look
and
so
everyone's talking about
luxurious. Yeah,
the test car or whatever, and you're like, what?
yeah. Just put some Wi-Fi into it, and I literally live 100 meters away from a stop.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I'm just waiting to ditch my car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we all are. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions coming through at this point, and we're about 10 minutes from the end, but yeah, I don't know if you had any closing thoughts to send, like lots of stuff to think about. Any parting thoughts that
Claire, before Yew-Thong, they'd like to see your contact information again, so they can reach out to you. If you don't mind
Okay.
flashing your slide one more time.
I can do
or
that.
we could just sort of end like the last
Yes, please, thanks. And
probably
then
not reading.
attendees would like a way to contact you outside of this, if you don't mind.
Yes, I will
Thanks.
do that right now.
Yeah, and I think is your email there as well?
Right there.
Perfect.
torontomu.ca. You can write me at my practice at ssgarch.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn. Do want to warn you that LinkedIn is not managed by me. My business manager runs it. So if you send me a message, it may be a day or two before I come around to it.
That's more than fair.
Yeah. We use that as a marketing tool. My business manager write things up and post it as though it's from me, but it's not from me. But nothing controversial, of course.
I just have a couple of closing announcements to make, unless you had anything else you wanted to add.
No, I thank you for your indulgence. Thank you for letting me present this craziness, but we have to start somewhere.
Such an important discussion. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Yew-Thong. Thank you so much for everyone who attended and who had those great questions. We really appreciate it. Just a couple of wrapping up questions. Next week, we have a webinar. We're back on the regular schedule, May 29th, and the title is Concave. It's a case study for 3D printing of concrete. So the OAA, again, as I mentioned earlier, will report your participation. So you don't need to individually report, but we just ask again that you're patient with us while we process and accredit your hours in the next week or so. We will also be sending out this presentation via email, and you'll have the contact if you didn't happen to write it down. And we will also send you a survey, so please do submit your feedback. We do highly value feedback. We appreciate that. And thank you again for your attendance, and please have a pleasant remainder of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.